Iran just declared war in Egypt, and this is just the beginning. Allow me to explain. We just heard today that British Petroleum are no longer going to pass through the Red Sea. We heard yesterday and the day before and the week before many other shipping companies, including Maersk, including many others, the same narrative. They're no longer going to pass near the Houthi rebels. They don't want to get attacked. They don't want to get hijacked. They don't want to get bombed. So they're going to go around. It's going to make things way more complicated, way slower, and mainly it's going to be a massive loss for the Egyptian economy because all those vessels that pass through the Red Sea also pass through the Suez Canal, the bottleneck that makes Egypt $10 billion a year, $30 million a day. 12% of the entire global shipping lanes go through the Suez Canal. And now it has halted to a screech. Zero. Nobody's going through that because the Houthi rebels are there and they're basically attacking every vessel that passes in the Red Sea. The risk is too big. But even though it sounds like this is a war against Israeli vessels, the Houthis are fighting against Israel in favor of the Palestinians and they're attacking Israeli vessels or vessels that are headed to Israel, it's a bunch of horse baloney. It's all an economic war. It has nothing to do with Israel. It's all about the United States and Iran and economic interests. Allow me to show you exactly how. Just a month before the attacks on Israel happened, in September 2023, President Biden announced his probably most ambitious plan we've ever seen on a global scale. The massive economic corridor, India, Saudi Arabia, Israel, the European Union, the United States. A huge corridor, railroad networks, shipping lanes, massive opportunities. This is the counter to the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. This is also the counter to the Russian-backed plan, which means Russia, Azerbaijan, Iran, India. This is a fight over who gets to play with India. India is the next global superpower. I've made a whole video explaining that. They are now on a much greater trajectory than China. Their demographics are the best in the world, English-speaking population, and there's no real wars they're involved in. And they're just getting warmed up. India has so much potential. It's scary to see where it's going to be in the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And everybody's fighting over who plays with India. The Russians, Iranians, they want them on their side. They want them through the Russian corridor or through the Chinese corridor. But the United States wants India on its side, under its influence, through this economic corridor. This is why the whole Abraham Accords even happen. Think about it. Abraham Accord happens during the Trump administration. What has been done in the Trump administration that President Biden and his team adopted wholeheartedly? Didn't change a quote. Nothing. If it started with Trump, Biden eliminated it. The only thing that Trump administration basically left and the Biden administration just took and kept on implementing word by word is the Abraham Accords. For the economic corridor, you need Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. They're the gateway to India. They can't play with Israel until there's normalization. Now, unofficially, the Saudis and the Israelis have been best friends for many, many years. But on the surface, they still have to play the game because of the Palestinian issue. MBS, the de facto ruler of Saudi Arabia, was talking about it in the open, saying, yeah, it's happening. Now, Israel did get attacked, but it didn't get attacked by Iran, not officially. It got attacked by Hamas. And a lot of people want you to think that this is about some sort of a freedom war for the freedom of the Palestinian people that is basically waged between Hamas and the Israelis. It has nothing to do with Hamas. Hamas did start as a Palestinian-based religious movement, but it's been hijacked by a bunch of criminals many, many years ago. The founder, Ahmed Yassin, is not the same guys who control it right now. Right now, it's the three guys who are billionaires and they live in Qatar: Khalid Mashal, Musa Abu Marzouk, and Ismail Haniyeh. They're billionaires and they couldn't care less about the Palestinian people. They have hijacked it for their own personal interests. While there's still a lot of sentiment, anti-Israeli sentiment, a lot of Israel hate in Hamas for sure, None of these guys like Israel. They would love to see it destroyed. But it has morphed into a criminal gang that's now being used to further the financial interests of its leaders. And sure, they would love nothing more than to destroy Israel in the process, but they're all about the Benjamins. Now, since that happened, one major thing you have to pay attention to is the chessboard. In the chessboard, in the eyes of Iran, Iran is the king. If you ever played chess, what is the one piece that almost never moves in a chess game? That's the king. The king almost never moves. So the Iranians are saying, look, September 2023, this is getting hairy. This corridor is about to take us and Russia out of the game and India into the arms of the United States. We have to do something about this. So what can we do? And then the Iranians look at this and say, okay, we're the king on this board. We're not going to move. We also have the pawns, which is Hamas. Let's move the pawn so we can make a big explosion. We'll sacrifice this pawn because it's clear that Hamas would be destroyed. We'll kill the pawn to start the fire in the region that potentially might ignite a regional war that's going to push the Saudis away from the United States and away from Israel. So they've sacrificed the pawn, which is Hamas, for this purpose. That didn't work. The plan was sacrifice the pawn, Hamas, get Israel to destroy Hamas, get the Israeli Arabs and the West Bank to start moving on Israel from within, and only then move your knight. Your knight is Hezbollah. Move the knight once Israel is in a turmoil where Hezbollah is the fourth front, not the second. Because if Hezbollah is the second front, while it will inflict major damage to Israel, it will get wiped out much like the Hamas. But because the Israeli Arabs and the West Bank never oppose, now moving the knight, Hezbollah against Israel, means sacrificing the knight. And the Iranians are not ready to sacrifice the knight. It's too expensive. So Hezbollah stays put. The only thing Hezbollah does is keep firing missiles, just enough not to start a war, just enough to pin some Israeli forces in the north of Israel so that Israel gets badgered by it. But nothing beyond that to start a war. Now the Iranians have a second knight. The chessboard is wide. On the one hand, Hezbollah. On the other ones, they have a very similar structure. A paramilitary, country-owning organization called the Houthi rebels. Much like Hezbollah owning Lebanon, the Houthis now own Yemen, which means they have access to major weaponry, missiles, helicopters. They have some serious firepower. So the second knight can cause a lot of damage without getting sacrificed as well. Because they're so far from Israel, they're so far removed, they can cause a lot of damage. But while the Houthis can fire a few missiles, ballistic missiles, drones into Israel, the Israeli air defense is just too strong for that. And to this day, the Israelis pretty much shut down everything the Houthi rebels have fired on top of them. Without an exception. Nothing lands. It's just too little, too far away. It's not going to work. But what the Houthis can do is something completely different, which is what they're doing right now. Attack the shipping lanes that lead to the Suez Canal. It's not about Israel. Israel has the second port in the north of Israel in which it can get goods and food and everything. So while it will take longer, it will be more expensive, Israel has a second port which is more active than ever right now, and they'll be fine. But the problem is the Suez Canal is now halted to zero activity. It's about suffocating Egypt. It's about sending a message. The Egyptians generate $30 million a day from the Suez Canal. That's a lifeline of Egypt. We're talking about 3-4% of the entire GDP of that country from that one canal. And now, it's basically blocked off by the Houthi rebels as the night which Iranians moved. But why would the Iranians try and suffocate Egypt? Allow me to explain. We're moving on to the second part of this and where it gets super interesting. So you might say, well, look, the Egyptians, they're Sunnis, the Iranians are Shiite, true. The Egyptians are secular, Iranians are religious, true. Egypt is US-backed, true. Egypt is at peace with Israel, it recognizes Israel, it cooperates with Israel, true. You can even say that there haven't been diplomatic relations between Egypt and Iran for 40 years, which is also true, but none of it is the real reason. The real reason comes from the video I've made a few weeks ago. And the title of the video was, "This is how you'll know when Hamas is done." And I told you, Egypt cannot play ball with the policy of the United States and Israel for the day after in Gaza until Hamas is 100% finished. Because the potential of Hamas to cause havoc, damage, and mayhem in Egypt from inside is insane. The Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas are basically like that. They're brothers. They're one of the same. And with the Sinai Peninsula connection, Hamas can get inside Egypt and stir shit up significantly, destabilizing the barely holding on regime of Sisi. And that's why Hamas have made a deal with Egypt a few years ago. In fact, that was Yahya Sinwar who made a deal with Sisi, saying, look, leave us alone. We're not going to meddle in Egypt, but don't cooperate too much with Israel. That deal is still in force in the eyes of the Egyptians. And that's why they've been very cold shoulder to the entire US-Israel initiatives. They haven't been cooperating with Hamas, but they haven't been helping at all. Now, the reason is because Hamas, through the Muslim Brotherhood, can cause a major uprising in Egypt and turn everything around, get all the secular guys killed, and the entire regime changed to a Muslim Brotherhood regime like that. So that's why I said, look, once Egypt moves with the US and with Israel for the day after plan, that is why, and that is how you will know that Hamas is finished and no longer scares Egypt. That is happening as we speak. Hamas is basically on mop-up right now. Israelis are cleaning up Han Yunis, they're cleaning up the north. It's a matter of time until the Israelis are finished with Hamas. Hamas has zero chances of winning this battle. It's over. The Iranians have to pull the second lever. Since now they've lost Hamas as an intimidating factor against Egypt, they have to create a second lever in which they have something, leverage on top of Egypt, not to cooperate with the United States, not to cooperate with Israel. And that lever is saying, look, this is what's going to happen. We're going to stop the shipping lanes into Egypt, and then we're going to suffocate your economy. What's going on right now is a message from Iran to Egypt to play ball. Because if the Egyptians don't play ball and they go with the US and Israel, they're going to keep the squeeze on Egypt super hard. Because if they don't play ball with the Iranians and the Houthi rebels will keep the Suez Canal inactive, the Egyptian economy is going to go into a tailspin, which might do the same result as toppling the government from inside. And this is also why Israelis are not responding to the Houthi rebels, because this is an Israelis fight. This is all about the US and Egypt and the regional dominance. The Israelis are not going to respond here. This will require a major US response, because on this chessboard, it's Iran versus the United States. Iran has made the first move, sacrificed the pawn. The Israeli pawn killed Hamas on the US side. Now, Iran moved the knight, which is the Houthi rebels, into the Suez Canal. And since at this point, Israel is already engaged in a war with Hamas and potentially looking at a second front with Hezbollah, that piece cannot move and engage with the Houthi rebels. This will have to be a second move from the United States directly. What they can do is give money and ammunition and support to the Egyptians and create some sort of a joint task force, US-Egypt task force, and move to the Red Sea, to the Suez Canal, and counter what the Houthi rebels doing, much like the United States and other countries did in the Somalia piracy issues. But in this case, it has to be a lot faster, because this is a game of time. So while I understand the rhetoric is about Israel, I also understand that this is about an economic game. And the next move here will come from the United States, which I expect to take an active part, maybe with Egypt, to fight back and push back the Houthi rebels and reopen the Suez Canal. Don't let them fool you. I'll see you in the next video.